All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tashin Stallings. I'm Program Analyst with the Homeless Education Program here at OSSE, and we'd like to welcome you to our webinar for the ARP-Homeless II CBO Application. We definitely want to make sure that you are able to participate with us in full detail. So we want to make sure that you are able to hear us, see us. We also want to make sure that you have, there are no challenges in being able to participate with us. So we will have moments where we will stop in the presentations to answer questions. So first, I would like to introduce our program manager, Ms. Portia Bates.
Hello, everyone. My name is Portia Bates, and I'm the Recovery Manager of Special Populations and Programs. Excited to be here to support this very important work today. And I look forward to a great presentation from our team.
All right, next we have Ms. Danielle Rollins.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danielle Rollins, and I am one of the program analysts for the Homeless Education Program. And happy to be here. Looking forward to this training.
All right, and then last but not least, we have Ms. Nicole Lee Wanda.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are so excited to have you all here today. We have a wonderful presentation in store for you and just really are grateful that you all are here today and really looking forward to having a really empowering session with each of you. So thank you so much, Tashin. If you can go ahead and start displaying the presentation, that would be fantastic.
All right, just want to confirm everybody can see. And, oh, sorry. Okay. And, all right. Portia?
Sure. Again, thank you everyone for coming. This is a wonderful opportunity for OSSE to partner with our community-based organizations as we support students experiencing homelessness through this new competitive grant. So today, for just a little while, we're going to spend some time walking through our key objectives for today, looking at some of the foundational information that you need to understand about the ARP-Homeless II program. There we go. Talking about a little bit about eligibility and things that your organization needs to be aware of before applying, discussing allowable uses of funds, and then the part that most folks have a lot of questions about, what the application process involves, its submission and timeline, program requirements. And finally, we'll wrap up the presentation by providing you with some resources and some context should you have any questions throughout this process. So again, my name is Portia Bates and I am the Recovery Manager, but we have an excellent team of folks here at OSSE who will be leading you through this presentation. Thank you for coming.
Please take a moment and use the question box to please introduce yourselves. We'd like to know who's here joining us, your name, your organization, position or title, and then what your expectations would be for today. So take a few moments. If you all can just write that into the chat box. Definitely want to just make sure we recognize who all is joining us this afternoon. Okay, we have Sasha Bruce, Youth Work, Oregon Department of Education, Federal Systems. Okay, Ms. Kincaid. All right, we have Daniel Rico. He's also from Sasha Bruce Youth Work. All right, Christopher Fuller from Total Family Care Coalition. Thank you for joining us today. We also have another person from the Oregon Department of Education, Chris James. Ms. Angela Jones from Youth Guidance DC. She's the Director of Development. All right, anybody else that hasn't had a chance to introduce themselves? Okay, Ashanti from LAYC. All right, thank you for joining us, Ashanti. Okay. And Chris also states that he's looking forward to learning from our team. Daniel says that he's looking to learn how we can leverage in-school, after-school, and emergency shelters to support this effort. Okay. All right. All right. Thank you all for sharing and introducing yourselves. Please also notice that there is a handout section. So in the handout section, you will see a PDF version of this presentation. So you can feel free to download that for your review. All right, so these are our objectives for today. We want to make sure that you have an understanding and an overview of the American Rescue Plan that we refer to in the brevity of ARP, in terms of the homeless children and youth funds. We also want to make sure you understand what the allowable uses of funds are. We're going to talk about program activities, requirements, and reporting, and then we will have a Q&A session to complete today's session.
Okay, good afternoon again, everyone. Again, my name is Nicole Lee Mwanda. I'm the Homeless Education State Coordinator here at OSSE. We really want to ensure that we provide a clear picture for each of you as far as the American Rescue Plan and the funding that's available. So with the American Rescue Plan, this came about under the American Rescue Plan Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief with the Homeless Children and Youth Fund. The acronym for that is ARP-HCY, and this was authorized by the U.S. Department of Education under Section 2001. This particular plan, this particular funding under the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 aims to support the specific and urgent needs of children and youth experiencing homelessness. Ultimately, we recognize that this particular population of young people has absolutely been impacted by COVID-19. And we want to ensure that students experiencing homelessness are truly supported during this time as we are trying to ensure that they're connected to resources and we are addressing learning loss. Next slide, Tashi. Thank you. So with the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, this particular federal guidance basically ensures that children and youth experiencing homelessness receive educational support. So under this act, this particular legislation defines children and youth experiencing homelessness and is the primary piece of federal legislation related to educating this particular population of students. With this legislation, again, we are ensuring that we follow the guidelines of McKinney-Vento, which is why we are offering links within this particular slide and later in the resources so that you're clear on what the mandates of McKinney-Vento are, because we must ensure that this funding is in alignment with McKinney-Vento. And so with this, OSSE has opted to use this funding to provide this funding opportunity for CBOs. But this funding also supplements existing grants that we have, such as McKinney-Vento, in assisting LEAs, local education agencies, in receiving the funding that they need as well to provide supports to students experiencing homelessness. So with the McKinney-Vento guidance, we are using that again as guidelines for how this funding should be spent, and we will get further into that later on. So OSSE, as I stated, will be awarding state level set aside funds received from the ARP-Homeless funding, and this particular pot is ARP-Homeless funding 2. And so this we are awarding to community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, and nonprofit organizations that are well positioned to identify historically underserved populations of children and youth experiencing homelessness. In particular, we're looking at disadvantaged populations within this particular subset, such as students of color, children and youth with disabilities, English learners, LGBTQ+ students, youth and pregnant and parenting youth, and caregiving students. And we're trying to ensure that these particular students are provided with supports and wraparound services. And specifically, again, it's for children and youth experiencing homelessness in need of educational services. So again, we have to ensure that this funding is in alignment with McKinney-Vento. And we want to ensure that programming supports the academic achievement and mitigates learning loss as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the purpose of the FY23 ARP-Homeless II Community-Based Organizations Grant is to increase the capacity of OSSE, the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, and LEAs, local education agencies or schools, school districts in the District of Columbia, by utilizing experienced district-based organizations. Again, let me reiterate that because this is federal funding for the District of Columbia, this grant funding must be awarded only to organizations that are based in the district that are licensed and approved organizations within the District of Columbia. And we're looking at organizations that have a demonstrated history of success working with children and youth and families experiencing homelessness. So the 3 areas that we're looking at is, number 1, to identify children and youth experiencing homelessness who have been impacted by COVID-19. 2, to ensure that we support them with accessing educational and/or wraparound services to meet their needs. And 3, deliver training, technical assistance, and capacity building to strengthen the provisions and coordination of services for this particular population, both within your organizations and for LEAs and schools. So those are the 3 areas that we're looking at, and we're going to get more into detail with that in just a moment. So with the ARP-Homeless II CBO grants, this will be distributed to eligible CBOs as a competitive grant in fiscal year 2023. So the dates for that would be October 1, 2022 through September 30th, 2023 to support both OSSE and LEA schools, LEAs and schools. Funds may be carried over to FY24, which is October 1, 2023 through September 30th, 2024, until all allocated funds have been exhausted. Remaining funds at the end of FY24 will be returned to OSSE. So eligible applicants include established CBOs, faith-based organizations, and nonprofits who meet the following criteria. These organizations must have demonstrated success or experience serving students experiencing homelessness in pre-kindergarten through the 12th grade within the District of Columbia. Also, these organizations must have demonstrated success or experience in urban areas and/or with LEAs or school districts. And finally, each organization must be in good financial standing with the District of Columbia per the Clean Hands Law. And you can see the DC code there. So again, ultimately, they have to be in good standing and have to be an organization that is licensed to do business in the District of Columbia.
So I will discuss the allowable use of funds. So the funding under the ARP-Homeless II CBO Grant must adhere to the allowable uses described in the Title 7B of the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. The first thing that we want to highlight is the gathering and making of publicly available, reliable, valid, and comprehensive information on the following: the number of homeless children and youth identified in the District of Columbia, which will be posted annually on the State Education Agency website. So if you go to our website, the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, if you do a search for the Homeless Education Program, which is under the Special Populations and Programs, you'll be able to see that for the past previous school years, we have identified the number of homeless children and youth that have been identified through the District of Columbia. And that information comes from the school's student information system, as well as data from the community partnership, which consists of organizations who are providing wraparound services for youth who are displaced or unaccompanied. We also have the nature and extent of the problems homeless children and youth have in gaining access to public preschool programs and to public elementary schools, as well as secondary schools. Providers of emergency, transitional, permanent housing to homeless children and youth and their families, including public housing agencies, shelter operators, operators of transitional housing facilities, and providers of transitional living programs for homeless youth. For instance, so we have like Sasha Bruce, who is joining us today. They have been a great resource of providing shelter, emergency shelter, transitional shelter for youth who are experiencing homelessness. And some of these youth are not in the care of their biological parents or guardians. We also have local educational agency liaisons designated throughout the District of Columbia. Within the charter schools and public schools, they are required under the DC District of Columbia to identify a school-based personnel, and it could be more than one, but usually there's at least one person who's identified as a point of contact to specifically assist and provide educational supports, resources for children and youth experiencing homelessness, and to assist families with any other type of resources related to housing, educational supports, academic supports for their children attending schools. We also have community organizations and groups representing homeless children and youth and their families. In order to improve the provision of comprehensive education and related services to homeless children and youth and their families, coordinating activities and collaborate with, as I mentioned before, the educators, the school-based personnel. There may be teachers, there could be administrators, people who are involved in child development, preschool, after-school programs. We also have providers of services for homeless children and youth and their families, including public and private child welfare and social service agencies, law enforcement agencies, juvenile and family court, agencies providing mental health services, domestic violence agencies, child care providers, runaway homeless youth centers, providers of services and programs funded under the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act. So for instance, we have Total Family Care Coalition, who provides such of these services as described for children, as well as the parents and families who are in a transitional housing situation. Providers of emergency, transitional, and permanent housing to homeless children and youth and their families, including public housing agencies, shelter operators, and other operators of transitional housing facilities, also are involved in terms of how the funds can be used. So, for instance, you may have House of Roof or DC Safe are examples of these organizations who may support families and children and youth in need of transitional housing. We also have local education agency liaisons designated under the subsection to support homeless children and youth. So as I mentioned before, we have liaisons designated in the schools. They are responsible for providing the appropriate resources. They are responsible for attending trainings. They are responsible for making sure that they are in compliance under Mckinney-Vento to supporting children and youth experiencing homelessness. And then we also have community organizations and groups representing homeless children and youth and their families. Additional allowable uses of the ARP-Homeless CBO funds are as follows. Carrying out the District of Columbia State Plan to provide for education of homeless children and youth. Collecting data to assess the educational needs of homeless children and youth. Providing technical assistance, conducting monitoring of LEAs in coordination with the LEA liaisons for homeless children and youth. Providing professional development opportunities for LEA personnel and LEA liaisons designated to assist those who are identifying and meeting the needs of homeless children and youth. Providing training on the definitions of terms related to homeless children and youth. Some people this may be their first encounter of understanding McKinney-Vento. So making sure that understanding the definitions and terms that are associated with McKinney-Vento is also very vital. This helps alleviate any prejudice, any misunderstandings, and making sure that the appropriate communication is provided. Responding to inquiries from parents and guardians of homeless children and youth and such youth, in the case of unaccompanied youth, which are those who are not in the care of their biological parent or guardian, to ensure that each child or each youth is a subject of inquiry receives the full protection and services provided by McKinney-Vento. Additional allowable use of funds may include responding to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. As we know, that it has not disappeared. It is still very present in our society, in our culture, in our city. So we want to make sure that any expenses that are reasonable and necessary to facilitate the identification, enrollment, retention, and educational success in children and youth experiencing homelessness, funds can be used to address that. Funds can also be used to complete deliverables as described in the program requirements. Eligible community-based organizations can use ARP-Homeless II CBO funds for activities that will re-engage, provide resources, and help students recover from their academic and learning opportunities within the District of Columbia. When re-engaging students and families throughout the District of Columbia, activities must include identification of underserved population of children and youth experiencing homelessness. As it was mentioned earlier, the students of color, disabilities, English learners, those who identify under the LGBTQ banner, those who may be pregnant or parenting individuals. Again, this population must have been disconnected from school due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Such activities may also include any type of community and street outreach, translation of printed materials highlighting educational rights and resources to address students and families experiencing homelessness, and then providing supports for disconnected youth also experiencing homelessness. Connecting students, some of these resources can be used to provide activities that include connecting students experiencing homelessness that mitigate the impacts of COVID-19 and support their academic success. We also may want to include activities that have wraparound services for expectant or parenting youth, those who are identified under the LGBTQ banner, students with disabilities, English learning students, or other disadvantaged populations that are identified as experiencing homelessness. We also want to make sure that activities include expansion of youth emergency shelter and existing youth transitional programs for providing either any type of bed or shelters for the youth that are ages 15 and over. And then also any type of program and activities that address the mental health, dental needs, medical needs, or any other type of health services for youth families experiencing homelessness. When it comes to the recovery functions and activities for allowable use of funds, they must address learning loss, achievement gaps, for students experiencing homelessness. As we know, during COVID-19, there are many families, many students who were disconnected from school due to the virtual learning environment. So when school started returning back, some families and some students did not return back to schools or readily re-engage back to in-person learning. So we want to make sure that you understand that these funds can be used to address those learning loss and the achievement gaps of students. Activities must include training, technical assistance, capacity building. We want to make sure that youth experiencing homelessness within the district are engaged in your organization or are somehow connected to an LEA in school within the District of Columbia. Other activities that can be provided for recovery includes trainings, technical assistance, focusing on families that are impacted by COVID, trauma-informed care, either racial equity, various best practices supporting underserved populations of children, youth experiencing homelessness, and then also community outreach, again, printed materials, public materials that can be either produced or distributed within the community, and also addressing various languages to address those populations, families who are non-English speaking or immigrant or migrated populations.
Thank you, Tashin. My name is Danielle Rollins. I introduced myself earlier, and I'm going to cover the application submission process. So first, we're going to look at the ARP-Homeless II, and that's for FY23, and Nicole went over what that time frame is. From October 1, 2022 to September 30, 2023 is our FY23 fiscal timeline. So we're going to look at everything leading up to the program period. First of all, ARP-Homeless II CBO application release date was July 8th. We originally were going to schedule to do a pre-application workshop on the 22nd, but we extended the date. So the first one is now today, August 3rd. We are going to be scheduling a second one to be determined. The notice of intent, we extended that date to August 12th, 2022. The notice of intent is encouraged. So please, if you are interested in applying for this grant, please submit a notice of intent by August 12th. It helps us with our planning if you submit a notice of intent. And then finally, the most important date is the application due date. So the application is due on August 19, 2022 by 3 p.m. The reason that we say by 3 p.m. is because if you have any technical issues or anything that you run into any problems along the way, it gives you time to reach out to our technical team. And their day ends pretty early. So they ask if you can have all concerns submitted and worked out by 3 p.m. so that you can submit your application on time or before 3 p.m. We usually recommend that you begin the process a day or two before because there may be some technical issues on your end and on our end, so just be careful. Yes.
Sorry, if I may, I want to clarify something. The notice of intent is a requirement. So all CBOs interested in applying and submitting an application must submit a notice of intent by August 12th. As Danielle spoke about initially, the deadline was today at 3 p.m. And we recognize that since we are having this technical assistance session today and it ends at 3, that we wanted to be sure that people had enough time to complete the notice of intent and submit it. So we extended it to August 12th, but in order to be eligible to submit an application by August 19th, you have to submit the notice of intent. So without the notice of intent and meeting that deadline, you would be ineligible to apply and submit an application by the 19th. So I just wanted to be sure to clarify that. Sorry for interrupting.
No, thank you, Nicole. I didn't get that memo. I apologize. But so keep that in mind. Disregard what I said. Again, the application is due August 19 by 3 p.m. So please be mindful of that and plan accordingly. The date for reimbursements when they can be submitted is starting November 1st, November 1, 2022. So again, our program fiscal year begins October 1. So a month later, you could begin to submit reimbursements if you have any. Again, our program period, October 1, 2022 to September 30, 2023.
I'm sorry, let me also reiterate something else too. So we did have 2 technical assistance offerings, one on July 22nd and one on August 3rd. We did not have anyone in attendance on July 22nd, but we will not be offering a 3rd session. So those were the only 2 offerings that we had. And so this is the one and only offering that we have for technical assistance. We will be posting this recording on our webpage. In addition to that, if we have any questions that come out of this session, we will be posting an FAQ document so that people can view the questions that came about, and any subsequent questions will also be posted on the webpage as well.
Thank you for that clarification, Nicole. Tashin, you can go to the next slide. The application process. CBOs must submit an application in EGMS, we call it, which is the Enterprise Grants Management System. It is an online tool that we use for all grants here at OSSE, and so you must complete an application in that system. And we are going to spend a little bit of time reviewing that application online at the end of this section of our presentation. Once OSSE has fully approved the application, awardees will receive a final grant award notification, or as we call it, the GAN, generated through the Enterprise Grants Management System. And that will include the award amount that you have been awarded, the the award agreement, terms and conditions of the award, and any supplemental information required. The GAN becomes your right arm because it will help you to stay compliant with this grant. It will share with you the amount that you have, dates will be included in the GAN, terms and conditions of the GAN, and like I mentioned before, any supplemental information that will be required for this grant. Any requested documentation must be uploaded into EGMS under the supporting documentation request tab. And again, we'll look at that when we review the EGMS application online. We'll do a tutorial. Within EGMS, there is also a central data application. All applicants must complete and submit a central data application, which includes the following: the universal numbering system. It's an entity identifier, which can you can receive that through the System for Award Management, or SAM. Also in SAM, you will receive an expiration date, and that date must be a current expiration date in order for you to be able to receive grants through our grant process. You can apply for both the unique identifier as well as the SAM expiration date by going to www.sam.gov. Also in the central data application, you must sign off on general assurances. Your authorizer, or the authorized person or representative at your LEA, is the person that would sign off on these assurances, which are legally binding for this grant, so that you will be able to just sign off on what the assurances are for this grant, attesting that you will comply. Subgrantees may submit an application but cannot receive reimbursements until an approved central data application is on file. Also, a part of the competitive process, all applications that are received will be reviewed by a review panel The review panel is comprised of a minimum of 3 neutral, qualified professional individuals who are external to OSSE. They are selected for their unique qualifications, their knowledge and expertise in the objectives of the elementary, secondary, and specialized education fields. They will be responsible for scoring and ranking applications and making recommendations for funding consideration. Reviewers meet and assess applications based on a common rubric. If you have any technical difficulties when you are working to submit your application, please contact the EGMS Customer Service Support Team. They will be able to assist you with any technical challenges that you may have. And now we're going to take a quick tour of EGMS so that you will have a firsthand bird's eye view of what the application looks like. So I'm going to share my screen. Tasheen, do I have access to share my screen? It's grayed out. Thank you. Okay, can you, for a show of hands, everybody that can see EGMS landing page? All right. Terrific. This is the screen that you will see when you log into EGMS. The login information is in the RFA, so you will be able to just go to this login. Now, this site that you're looking at now is actually a test site. We're not using live applications, just so you know that, because any information you should see, just be mindful, it's not live. So you're not seeing any LEA or any CBO's personal information. So I'm now going to log in to this test site. Then you will land on this menu list page. Here you will be able to select the various applications. You're going to see a lot of applications because this is our test site. But when you click on, you should be able to go to any applications that are available for FY23. And of course, you want to choose the ARP-Homeless II CBO Grant. So I'm now going to just go all the way in. You shouldn't see anything like this unless you already have grants from OSSE. So before we get started with the ARP-Homeless II CBO Grant, as you see here, I'm going to go do a quick review of the central data application because, as I mentioned, everyone who receives a grant from OSSE must complete the central data application. You must have an approved application on file. So I'm going to do a very quick review of this application because we'll spend most of our time together for this section talking about the actual CBO application. So when you click on the application, this is what the central data application looks like. You see tabs here. These are the tabs that you would review or complete. This first tab is an overview tab, and pretty much every application, every one of our applications in EGMS has an overview tab. The overview tab gives you context around what this application includes, what the purpose is, general information about the application. For some of them, there's even more information. You'll see that when we look at the ARP-Homeless II CBO application. Another thing to be mindful of is when it's grayed out, that is the actual screen that you're looking at. So all these blue tabs, we haven't clicked on those, but we will click through them just so you'll have a quick overview of what's in those tabs. Central contacts. This tab, you would include your CBO address and any contact person that you would want to include for your application. Your CBO, I want to say LEA, forgive me, your CBO representative, the person that can sign off on your application, should be listed. You see here where it says head of school or organization. That's where you would include the head of your organization. And then your business manager or whomever you identify as your business manager would be listed here. Now, this is noted as the DUNS number and SAM UEI number. It is now SAM UEI number that you may see once they update the central data application. But for now, they still have DUNS listed here. Mainly, you want to click here where it says sam.gov. It will take you there to the SAM website, and you will be able to apply for your SAM expiration date, and you'll be given a unique entity identifier. Okay, that number will be the number that you will include down here. And to the current SAM UEI number, you would include that. You get that directly from SAM, as well as the expiration date. They must be current. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the assurances. These are the central data assurances, the certifications. The assurances, a list of assurances here. You want to read through them. Again, your authorizer is the one that should be signing off on these. And here's where you would verify. Now, this is a test site, but what will be here is a submit button, okay, at the bottom. Once you click that button, then you will be able to submit your application, including the assurances that would be signed off on. If you have multiple grants from OSSE, they would all be listed here, as well as the amount that has been allocated to your CBO. And then just a summary of your grant. Now, if you'll notice, when I click on these blue buttons up here, for some of them, other buttons open. So you want to make sure that you're looking at everything that, you know, is under those different tabs. Okay. And then submit. When you submit, and I'm going to talk about, I'll talk about it now because it's the same process. Whenever you submit an application to OSSE, you must do a consistency check. After the consistency check is done, it will let you know that your application, their consistency check was successful, and then you would be able to, once you submit, your application would be locked, and then it would be sent to the next person. Generally, the next person at the CBO or LEA level would be your authorizer. They will then submit to OSSE. Okay, so you can either the authorizer can do the whole process, or there could be a different person that prepares the application, and then the authorizer would then submit the application. Okay, once it is sent to them, because it's usually a second step. All right, so that was just a quick overview of central data. Now we're going to go into the actual CBO application. Give me 1 second. Might be easier for me to just go back. Oops, it's because this is open. Hold on. There we go. So I'm going to go back to the menu. Now, the reason I'm using this subgrantee is because we can create a new application. During the testing, we actually create applications, so I didn't want to use somebody that had already been used. So what you do is when you get to this landing page, you'll see various applications that are available. You want to click on the ARP-Homeless II CBO Grant, create an application for 2023. And once you do that, working. There we go. This is what the ARP-Homeless II CBO application looks like. Again, you see all the tabs up here. Please note the overview tab, overview pages Several pages have opened up down here under Overview. Okay. I just wanted to click on the other ones so you would see the difference. So as you click through these tabs, this is informational, okay? It gives you an overview of all the information that we have gone through with you during this presentation so that everything is in one place for you. The EGMS system also serves as a repository of information so that you always have right at your fingertips everything that concerns this grant. So general program information is here, background information, all the information that was shared previously. And then allowable uses of funds, we talked about that earlier. I'm just clicking through so you can have a chance to see what is in this application. Allowable uses of funds that Tashin went over in detail there. Project requirements. And I believe these slides will be coming up soon, so I won't go into detail. Award administration, again, this is information that will be coming up. Okay, all of this is informational. Resources, Nicole mentioned that at the end of the presentation, there'll be a list of resources. They are also here in the EGMS application for you so that you don't have to jump in and out of other documents. Everything is in one place. And then a definition of terms in the event that you want to learn more, or you should, about McKinney-Vento terms, you know, the term for homelessness, as well as some other terms that that pertain to families experiencing homelessness. And then finally, the award process. It just talks about the review panel here. Now you see 3 tabs opened up under the award process. The review panel selection process, just a blurb there about that. The application scoring overview. This gives you an overview of how your application will be scored. You want to pay attention to this slide as you're working through completing your application, because this slide will let you know what reviewers will be looking for as they review your application. Okay. And then the actual scoring rubric. This gives you an overview of what the rubric looks like. As you see, there are 4 sections and a scoring summary. So let's just click through those. This first one is either you met the requirement or you didn't meet the requirement. If you did not meet the requirements on this slide, your application will not be forwarded to reviewers. Okay, you have to meet both of these requirements listed here. Now, just so you'll know, the first met is you simply completing the contact page. And we're going to go over that next. Okay. And then the second met requirement here is your assurances. You can't even submit your application without completing the assurances. So you're pretty confident in making sure that your application will go through the first section. Now, section B is a breakdown of everything that reviewers will be looking at as they review your application, depending on what it is you're applying for. So if you're applying for training, then the reviewers will be looking for content in your application about how you're going to do training, who you're going to be training. So we have different categories here that you'll be scored under. Scoring criteria is here listed. Data, methods. So they will be looking at how you are going to be providing these services, the methodology around what you will be doing to serve this population of student, or I'm sorry, of the population that we serve, families experiencing homelessness. And I jumped right to training because training is one that you can actually choose your application can be focused on training. And we'll talk more about that as we go through the spending priorities. Section B is the project narrative information. Section C is strategic implementation. So what reviewers are going to be looking for, roles and responsibilities. Do you clearly identify who's going to be doing what? A timetable or timeline. Evaluation, how you will evaluate your program to make sure that you are meeting your goals and that you are actually providing the services that you spelled out in your application. So you will look at that and see if those goals that you spelled out in your application are actually working, and if not, is there a need to course correct? And you will be looking at all of that as you evaluate the program that you will be offering. So you want to write about that. And then the budget. And the budget is what we call the detailed planning expenditures. That is actually the budget. And we'll go over that as well. Now, as you see, the scoring criteria, the scoring categories are excellent, good, fair, or poor. And that's what the reviewers will be using as the rubric for scoring your application. So again, you want to read through the descriptions here of what is a strong or an excellent application versus what is not so good. You don't want to fall in that category. You want to write to, as you write your application, you want to write it in a way that you are writing to have an excellent application in all categories. And the final section, section D, partners. So you will be able to list partners that you will work with, leveraging supports from them to be able to really provide a comprehensive program or comprehensive wraparound services or support or whatever it is that you're writing, that your application will be focused on. And then resources that you will have available for families experiencing homelessness. And again, you want to look at those criteria so that you will be able to write a strong application. Finally, as the reviewers complete the rubric, EGMS will automatically add up the scores. Okay, for each section, there is a number of points. For the first section, program narrative, 50 points, strategic implementation, possible maximum number of points are 30 points, and key partnerships, maximum of 20 points. As you see here, assurances and contact information is met or not met. Okay. Are there any questions at this point before I move forward? I see Nicole wrote, I believe it's Nicole that wrote it in there, or is it, who wrote that? I'm trying to look at the questions as well. Daniel, thank you, Daniel. Daniel mentioned, just heads up, that SAM no longer uses DUNS, and that is correct, but the application still said DUNS, and so I need to make sure that for central data that I mention that to our development team. But thank you for that, Daniel. Okay. So now we're going to jump into the nitty-gritty of the application. Remember, the overview pages are informational, very important for you to look at. It's a great way to review everything that's being discussed today. But now you're going to complete the application based on the next couple of tabs. Contact information. Under contact information, you want to list your organization or your organization's leader here. Even though you did that in central data, you also want to include that person here so that when we're working with the CBO subgrantees, everything is in one place and we can just work with the information from this application. for reporting purposes as well as our information, so that if we need to reach out to someone, we have all the contact information. The primary program contact person, you want to list them here. Your finance or grant manager. And then if there is any other contact person regarding homeless work that you want to include, you can include them here under homeless application contact. Or I should say, here you can list up to 5 additional email addresses, okay? These are people that you want to share with us in the event that we can't reach one person, we know to go to the next, or in some cases we may send an email to everyone listed so that everyone at your CBO will be aware of whatever it is, whatever the information is that we're sharing. So what you would then do is you would click on, you would click through here, you would type in, I'll just plop my name in there. Okay, then you just click add additional email addresses, and you can add other people, as many as you want, up to 5. So those 5 should be in addition to the 3 or 4 that are listed here in the body of this section. Okay. Now the reason that it's saying this is because I didn't hit save. At the end of each page, you must save the information you just populated. If you do not save it, it'll give you that error message or that warning message to let you know you're about to leave that page and it's not saved. If you continue forward and don't save, it will remove all the, or it will not save all the information you just took the time out to complete. So you want to make sure that you that you save the page before you go to the next section. Now, I'm not going to save because I am not completing the application as we go through this. So I'm going to say leave so I can go to the next tab. The next tab, the spending priority areas. Tashin went over the spending priority information. So now here is where you would answer some questions around what you plan on including in your application. This is actually the information that we are going to be, that the reviewers are going to be reviewing using the scoring rubric for the various criterias, the program criteria, and the various sections that we talked about earlier. So as you see here, there's a title, program narrative, needs assessment, data, and methods. So you can glean that this is probably going to inform those sections that we talked about in the scoring rubric. So you want to go back to the scoring rubric and look at that, make sure that you know what's going to be reviewed for this section, and then write your response. The narratives are up to 5,000 characters. Okay, that's the maximum amount of characters that you can use in these text boxes. And that's for all text boxes. Okay. So you see there's a guided question. What is your organization identified as the primary educational and related needs of children and youth experiencing homelessness who have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19? You respond to that accordingly. Likewise for number 2, about assessments, the methods used. And then for number 3, it's a checkbox. But if you click on other, another narrative box or text box will open, and you can then write or include whatever other data sources in this instance that you used to perform your needs assessment. For number 4, same thing. You would choose the type of qualitative data sources. And if they're not listed here according to what method you used, then you would click other, and then you can write in here any tools or information that you used to gather or to collect assessment data. And then finally, number 5, I'm sorry, for mine it's number 5. Number 5, you're going to list all agencies with which you are coordinating to meet the identified needs. So you want to talk about your partners here? And then law, as you saw in the rubric, there's a section that talks about the law. So please share how your organization will examine its processes and strategies to ensure ARP-Homeless and MKV requirements are met. And then finally, if your application is to conduct training, please share how your organization will create and deliver training, technical assistance. You also want to talk about like how you'll train staff that will be working on this program. So you want to, give a thorough response here about any training that you will be doing. And if your application is to provide training, really want to dive in and write how you will be conducting trainings, what kind of trainings they will be, etc. And as I mentioned, you do want to include staff training because this is of course, it's new to everyone that will be participating in your as a part of your subgrant. And so you want to conduct training so that everyone will be on the same page as far as what the requirements are for homeless education work. And again, don't forget to save or you'll lose all your information. Now, a question that often comes up, can we save along the way and then come back to complete this? If there's any sections that are left that are not completed, then you will not be able to save. It will let you know that you have to complete if there's any that are required. And all of these text boxes are required. I believe they're all required except maybe, well, I think they're all required. So you want to make sure that if you do decide that you want to come back to your application, just put some kind of character in there, even if it's just gibberish or stopped here or something, so that you can save your place, then save, so that you can then come back to the application, okay? And I've had people that have had to collaborate with somebody before they can answer a certain question. So there may be times that would happen. So that's project narrative. Strategic implementation. I'm leaving, but don't you forget to save, but I'm going to close it and go to strategic implementation. Here's the section where you talk about roles, timeline, measurable goals and outcomes, and project milestones. Now here it talks about to help monitor progress. As we go through the presentation, you will see that programs will be monitored as well. So Nicole will discuss that at a later time, but just be mindful that as you're monitoring the progress of your program, we will be looking at how your program is progressing as well. And then project narrative evaluation section is here. And then, of course, you have an opportunity to describe how your organization will use the evaluation data to improve future program activities, or even to improve what you're currently doing. And then finally, a narrative around the budget. You'll identify any activities which the funding is to be used for. You have an opportunity to write narrative here. And then when you go to the detailed planning expenditures, you will be able to then plan your actual budget. Key partnerships. Talk about your partnerships in the first, number one. Number two, any resources that you will present or have available for families experiencing homelessness or families residing in emergency and transitional housing sites. So, and it says here, if not applicable, please respond with not applicable. But make sure you put something in that text box so that you will be able to save the page and move on to the next section. Now, Tashin went over these with you earlier. The various spending categories, we selected 3 spending categories for this work to ensure that families who are experiencing homelessness and still struggling through COVID pandemic would be able to receive the supports that they need. The first section, engage students. I'm sorry, re-engage students. Okay, what you would then do is you would click through any of these funding categories that you will include that you have included in your narrative and that you will include in your budget. So, for example, if you decide that you want to hire staff, okay, or you want to provide wraparound services. Yes, let's use wraparound services as a theme completing this application. So wraparound services to re-engage families. So you select wraparound services and any other categories here. But again, anything that you select here, we need to see that in your budget so that it all aligns. Okay, even if it's written in the narrative or if the actual category is in the budget, you'll see what I mean when I go there. So I'm going to click through so you can see the other categories Tashin went over, but we're going to go with wraparound services to re-engage. We also have connect students to resources. Any that you select, you would then include in your budget and in your narratives. Your applications should align. And then finally, recover student learning. These are the categories under that section. If you have any other categories, you're being creative and you're really thinking outside of the box, you do have space here to write that in under other use of funds, not previously included in specific priorities. And you can write that in here. And as you see under there, when you go to the budget, you'll notice that the codes here, I call them the A, B, C, and D sections. Is for this one, it would be D1 other. So whatever you write in here, when you go to the budget, you want to select D1 other, and then you would write a brief description about how you're going to use the funds. And we're going to go to the detailed planning expenditures before going to GEPA, so that I can, link the two tabs together. So again, we have selected re-engage students, wraparound services, okay? So now when I go to the detailed planning expenditures, you also have some other categories here. Salaries and benefits, professional services, equipment, supplies and materials, fixed property costs, other objectives. And then the tab next to that is just the budget summary. So once you've completed your budget, you can always click on budget summary and see how much you allocated for each of those categories that I just discussed, these budget categories, okay? And budget overview and data import just lets you know, budget overview is what you're looking at now, and data import, you're able to create like an Excel spreadsheet or whatever you want to use to then create your budget if you so choose to do it outside of EGMS, and then you can plug the information in. Okay, so let's say we're doing wraparound services, and we're talking about re-engage, so let's say professional services. So down here, you would go to the first section here that says items to be purchased. Now we're talking about professional services. You may decide that you want to re-engage students by translating information. Now there is a category for that, but under your wraparound services for re-engaging students, you may determine that that is a need to be able to really engage all the students that you want to serve. So you would then write whatever it is that you are going to do here. It could be transportation, it could be whatever category that you feel that you want to include here. I'm going to say transportation. Okay. And then under budget code, Remember, we selected wraparound services re-engage. So that's what you will select here. And then you'll write a brief description. Now, the difference with these text boxes and other text boxes is these are not 5,000 characters. It's a brief description of the purpose of funds. You've written a whole lot previously in the other tabs and the other text boxes. So here you're just going to talk about a brief description of the purpose of this particular purchase. So if we're going to say maybe you're going to use a bus service to transport students from shelters to a location, X location, for instruction, or let's say for tutoring services. Just to mention something. There are other categories where you may want to focus in, like under what I call category C, which will be down here, recover. There are sections here where you can do after school and tutoring and all of that. So if that's what you want to choose, you can. But we just selected wraparound services here, okay? And then ARP-Homeless II CBO funds, how much you are going to allocate for this service. I just put a number in there, okay? And that's it for completing that part of the application. And then again, down here, you want to save. If you have multiple line items here, then you will calculate, you'll be able to see how much you've allocated for this category. And again, this category was professional services. Once you calculate, make sure you save. That time I did save because it's only one category that I have there. Because as you click through, you may want to put something under supplies and materials. Whatever you put here, it needs to total the full amount that you want to apply for. Okay, so under transportation, I put 10,000. Okay, but say under supplies and materials, another 10,000. Your total amount that you would apply for would be $20,000. Okay, if you're applying for more, then your budget should reflect that. It's totally up to you what you're applying for, how much you request. You do know based on the RFA how much is in the bucket of money for this competition. So you want to be mindful of that as well. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to the tab that we skipped. Okay. This is just requesting that you include a general statement of information about your organization's organizations are required to describe how federal grant funds will ensure that students, staff, and other beneficiaries with special needs have equitable access to and participation in grant-funded activities. Okay, list any potential barriers that could impede equal access. You want to also mention that, non-discrimination clause, but just to include a general statement about non-discrimination and hiring policy is not sufficient. You want to include specifics about how you will serve the population that these funds are allocated for. And specifically, you want to focus in on how you will ensure that all students, including students with special needs, would have access to these services or the services that you will provide. If you're doing training and it's training for LEAs or training for shelters or something like that, then you still need to write a statement about how you will be inclusive. Okay? And then finally, I mentioned earlier about these assurances. So here they are. And what you want to do is read through the assurances and then click on the button. And as you see here, by checking the boxes and saving, or this checkbox, and saving the page here at the bottom, save again, then you hereby certify that you understand, that you read through and understand and will comply with the assurances listed below. Okay. After you've saved this page, you do want to click on this next tab. Oops, I should have saved that one because we could have. Didn't have content. But after you, I might as well save it. Let's just do it in case it affects the next page. It probably will. Assurances agreement summary. Here is where I mentioned that your legal entity agrees. This is where the representative for your organization would sign off on those assurances. Okay. So you would just simply click there and you see a date and is entered in this box. That is the date that these assurances were agreed upon. And then you would proceed to the submit button. Here, again, you will do a consistency check. This should look familiar because you saw this in the central data application. All of our applications, you must do a consistency check because any text boxes or any information that you did not include that was mandatory, it will let you know. So this is a great way for you to catch anything that was left out, as well as it will not allow your application to be submitted without you completing those sections. Now, it's not looking at content. It's simply looking at whether you completed each section that was required. Once you do the consistency check, I'm going to have a whole lot of errors because I didn't complete the application. But just so you see what it looks like. These were all required, and this is information I did not include. And as you see here, contact information is really listed. So you'll have met that requirement once you complete those sections. Consistency check will let you know. Once the consistency check is successfully completed, then you will be able to submit your application. There'll be a submit button here, and then you will be able to submit it to the next level. If it goes to the administrator of your organization, then that person will need to go in. All of this needs to happen before the due date. So once you hit submit, you want to pay attention to whom the application has been submitted to. In other words, you want to look at where it went next, and it will say submitted to the administrator or submitted to OSSE for review. If it says submitted to OSSE for review, you're in good shape. It has successfully submitted to us. Okay. Are there any questions about the application? You're welcome to unmute or write it in the questions box. Okay. Well, since I don't see any questions or concerns, then hopefully, you're equipped and ready to complete the application. And I'm going to turn everything back over to Nicole, and I will close out the application and give you back control, Tashin. Tashin, Nicole?
Yep, hold on.
While Tashin brings up the presentation again, just wanted to reiterate again for each of you in attendance that if you have any questions, if you have if you have technical assistance questions, please reach out to EGMS. That's the slide right there. You can call them or you can email them if you need technical assistance with the application. I know it's a lot of information that you just received with the walkthrough, but we want to be sure that you're successful in submitting your application. Okay, thank you, Tashin. All right, so we're now going to discuss the administration and training requirements. We're in the final stretch, everyone. I know you're getting a lot of information, but we are in the final stretch, my friends. So the payment process. Funds associated with the ARP-Homeless II CBO Grant are available strictly on a reimbursement basis and may only be used for allowable grant project expenditures during the grant period. So as we identified before, only within that specified grant period may you then receive reimbursement for costs that you have incurred. But all costs must meet requirements that are permissible use of federal funds within EDGAR and please pay attention to these particular citations that we've provided if you need additional clarifying information about the requirements. But also it must align with and support the projects described by your organization in the application. So again, if you're submitting reimbursement, it must be for aspects that you've identified in your application. Reimbursement requests, or RRs as we use as an acronym, must be submitted electronically through EGMS and must include expenses not yet claimed for reimbursement. Payments for services rendered and not merely incurred must be paid by the subgrantee to the payee prior to requesting reimbursement. So for instance, let's say you are requesting reimbursement for transportation services provided to youth that have been disconnected from their educational support system. So you are transporting them to school from their shelter. You must have paid the transportation company prior to requesting reimbursement for that expense. So that would be an example. Reimbursable payments shall be made through the OSSE cost reimbursement process and EGMS in accordance with uniform administrative requirements. So again, please pay attention to the citations if you need additional clarity on the guidance around those particular requirements. There are going to be two types of documentation that are required for your reimbursement requests for expenses related to specific budget categories. So they are as follows. Professional services, you must provide proof of receipt of goods and services and proof of payment. If you are submitting for equipment, please provide proof of receipt for the goods and services and proof of payment. And all other categories, then no supporting documentation is required. So for CBO Recover trainings, again, we mentioned that there were 3 different categories that you could focus on for your grant application. Again, those categories were reengage, resources, and recover. If you choose to do the recover funding and you're doing trainings, grantees for the recover award type will deliver high quality professional development on topics focusing on students and families experiencing homelessness impacted by COVID-19. So these particular trainings can be delivered to all interested LEAs or schools, community organizations, and or service providers in both synchronous and asynchronous formats. Grantees are required to submit all training materials to the OSSE Homeless Education Program at least 30 days prior to the dissemination of the dissemination date of approval. So whenever you determine you're going to do the trainings, whether they are live trainings or they recorded or electronic trainings that are available on your website, we want to be sure that OSSE has had a chance to review and approve the training materials to make sure that they align with the federal guidance around Mckinney-Vento and educating children and youth experiencing homelessness. So please be sure that you submit that in a timely manner to give us a chance to review, approve, and return it to you. Homeless education trainings, we are going to be offering a variety of trainings ongoing that you can take advantage of and attend. So within 90 days of receipt of funding, grantees are required to attend a minimum of 1 homeless education training offered by OSSE. And information on OSSE's trainings and webinars can be found on the Homeless Education Program webpage. So this is the link for that. So whenever you receive your funding, you can go on the website and say, oh, I see that they're offering a training in September, or I'm sorry, not September, because you're receiving it for October. So let's say you want to attend it in November. Then you would just register for that particular training, and then you can attend that training. In addition to the Homeless Education Program trainings and webinars, we also require that you attend a minimum of 1 training offered by a national organization focusing on homeless education and the plight of children, youth, and families experiencing homelessness. So 2 of the examples that we provide for national organizations that focus on this particular aspect is the National Center for Homeless Education and Schoolhouse Connection. Both of these links will take you directly to their training web pages, and you can register for their trainings. Again, they offer live trainings and they have recorded trainings. Mandated reporting requirements. So grantees are required to comply with district law pertaining to mandated reporting. Certain individuals providing direct services to students may be identified as a mandated reporter. Mandated reporters are professionals obliged by law to report known or suspected incidents of child abuse and/or neglect. Such individuals will be required to undertake mandated reporting training, and we provide the link for that. So if you have staff that are already mandated reporters and have been trained, then they would not have to take the training again. But if you have staff that are not trained as mandated reporters that will have direct contact with students, then they must undergo this training, and you may register through this particular link for trainings. In addition, grantees with staff working directly with students must have a policy on how staff, volunteers, or contractors are informed or trained for suspicion of abuse and neglect, and how to contact the organization's mandated reporter. So in addition to mandated reporting requirements, Tashin, you can go ahead to the next slide. I wanted to point out something else as well. There are additional requirements that are identified and outlined in the RFA. Please be sure that you pay close attention to this particular aspect, because the District of Columbia requires has quite extensive guidelines around requirements. Some of the requirements that you should pay attention to that are identified in the RFA are requirements around confidentiality, vaccination requirements, bullying prevention. So please, again, pay attention to these district government requirements and OSSE requirements within the RFA to make sure that your CBO is in compliance with these requirements. Okay, thank you, Tashin. You can go ahead with resources.
Thank you. Okay, so obviously all of this information that you guys are receiving today, it may be somewhat overwhelming, but we also want to make sure that there is appropriate information of resources available for you, that you can do your research, you can do your investigation. If you need to find any other supporting information for clarity, understanding as you apply for this application, this grant funding, in hopes of supporting youth and families experiencing homelessness within the district. So the ARP-Homeless Funds resources, the first link shows the actual legislation that was outlined by the Department of Education. And then you also have the Homeless Children and Youth HCY funds in terms of the emergency relief. So the information there that's available for you to review as well. Then there's the letter to the chief state school officers announcing the American Rescue Plan funding. So this lets you know the allocations, reservations, award notifications that Danielle had referred to earlier as the GAN. And then we also have the SEA reservations, SEA standing for State Education Agency, which is what OSSE is referred to. And notice that we also have it, oh, sorry about that. We have it for Homeless 1 as well as Homeless 2 grant applications. So then we also have the U.S. Department of Education's American Rescue Plan Act Homeless Fund final requirements. So again, when you get these, a copy of this, and again, the PDF version is in the handout section. You're able to click on the links to be able to review this information that is available for you. We also have FAQ, the frequently asked questions regarding to ARP homeless children and youth. These FAQs is from the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education. The National Center for Homeless Education, NCHE, they have their COVID-19 guidance. So this is just to let you know some of the information that has come out over the recent months since COVID has been impacting our communities. We also have Schoolhouse Connection, their ARP Homeless Funds overview and training webinars. In the previous slide, Nicole had referenced them in terms of their opportunities to provide resources and training and information regarding the American Rescue Plan and how it's connected to supporting children and youth experiencing homelessness. Again, those webinars will be available that you can sign up for the live recordings, and if for some reason you can't make the live recordings, a recorded session will be provided to you. But it's always important to make sure that you register for the trainings, whether you can attend or not. We also have
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
If I may add one more thing to what you just said. So I wanted to add some clarity to a lot of what we've shared today and what you may see on our webpage. This particular first link with the FAQ for the ARP-HCY from the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education. Many of the, if you look at this particular link and even our ARP funding webpage here at OSSE, you'll see a lot of information around local education agencies and the use of funding by LEAs. And I just wanted to reiterate again, because we touched on it briefly before, but just to remind you that initially this federal funding was released to support local education agencies and state education agencies throughout the country. So OSSE, as the state education agency, has opted to use part of our Homeless 2 funding to provide this competitive grant opportunity to CBOs. This is not something that is occurring throughout the US. States have chosen to use their funding in different ways, and it has been up to each state. So that's why I wanted to be sure to reiterate that as you're reading different links that, going through different materials to educate yourselves about this funding, why much of it is focused on local education agency use of funding versus community-based use of funding. But we wanted to provide this information to you because it still applies to you as a community-based organization. So again, we just wanted to be sure that we're clear on that and it's not super confusing as to why, it keeps referencing LEAs. But on our webpage, it is a resource for and provides clarity and guidance to not just CBOs, but also to local education agencies that are receiving this funding as well. So just be sure to look at strictly the CBO aspects on our webpage so that you know what's applicable for you when you're submitting your application, and to also view the amended RFA that reflects the new submission deadline for the notice of intent to apply. So all of the amended documents have been placed on our webpage as well. So thank you, Tasheen. Sorry for interrupting.
You're fine. Thank you for the clarity. The other two links that's listed here, the McKinney-Vento homeless assistance legislation, as well as the Education for Homeless Children and Youth Program non-regulatory guidance. This is really to give you a more in-depth understanding of McKinney-Vento supporting homeless children and youth, terminology, what the guidelines are from Department of Education, what the schools are responsible for, what the liaisons are responsible for, the state education agency, what their responsibilities are. This really gives you these two links give you a very comprehensive understanding of McKinney-Vento. Again, you may not have had much prior experience in terms of supporting homeless children and youth, or you may have staff who are new to supporting homeless children and youth. So we definitely just want to make sure that this information is available for you so that you can have the appropriate guidance to support language, the understanding, vocabulary, and any other type of regulatory legislation and information necessary as you move forward in this endeavor. So our closing contact information, as you can see, is listed here for you. Should you need to reach out for any particular reasons. We also have our general contact email, which is hep.osse.dc.gov. So myself, Portia Bates, who's our recovery manager for the homeless education program, Nicole Lee Wanda, who's the homeless education state coordinator. She oversees a high-level guidance of McKinney-Vento policies and programs that are going on within the District of Columbia. And then you also have Danielle Rollins, who handles a lot of our grant program-related activities when it comes to Formula Grant and the Homeless Education 1 and 2 funding compliance. Myself, I am available to assist with trainings and any type of assistance with enrollment and community outreach among organizations within the District of Columbia, as well as with the charter and public schools where children may be attended. We'd like to give you go ahead.
I'm sorry, Tasheen. Before we open up for questions, may I add one more key point about the content of the presentation? First of all, thanks to the HEP team for providing such good information and walking us through the application process for ARP-Homeless II, the CBO competition portion. Please note that the slides that are included really contain the meat and potatoes of what's needed in order to apply for the CBO grant, but they aren't necessarily comprehensive for everything that you should be mindful of. So the RFA itself, that is your guide. So you want to make sure that you're familiar with all of the different components of the RFA, as the application portion in EGMS is directly aligned to the RFA. So please make sure that you review all of the different sections, and feel free to reach out if there are questions. But keep in mind, while this was great information, the presentation today was mostly highlights of the most important things, but the RFA is something that you still want to study and make sure you fully understand before submitting an application. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Portia. And so we want to give you guys an opportunity, if you do have questions, if you want to verbally ask, this would be the opportunity to do so. We just want to make sure you have the option of using your microphones to engage with us, to ask. I do see a couple of hands that are coming up. So just want to make sure. Daniel, can you use your mic?
Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Awesome. All right, thank you. That was really helpful. So I did see that there's an opportunity to expand either emergency shelter, transitional housing. So just to make sure I understand this, the housing can be for unaccompanied minors as well as maybe their families and homeless youth, correct?
Yeah, so And I just want to clarify. So unaccompanied minors are children and youth who are experiencing homelessness, but they're not in the care of their biological parent or guardian. So let's just say if I was a 17-year-old attending a high school, for some reason my parents are not supporting me, they're not giving me any type of parental guidance, support whatsoever. Perhaps they may have passed away, perhaps they may have been incarcerated, or they may have just abandoned me altogether. So that is just a identifier of children and youth who may be experiencing homelessness because they may not be in a stable home situation. So those individuals plus families who are in a shelter program, families who may be in a doubled up situation, so they may be staying with either other family members or they could be staying with some friends or a friend of a friend. So those individuals would be eligible of being identified under McKinney-Vento and could be identified for housing supports.
Got it. Okay. And then just my second question is, thinking more broadly, what are the biggest needs that OSSE has, and how can we be helpful?
So your questions are important, and I want to be sure that I'm clear in my guidance. With the RFA, it really outlines where the need is. So I would refer you back to the RFA to be sure to look at what's outlined there, as far as where the needs are and where the focus are and what OSSE desires CBOs, organizations to do as far as this grant funding is concerned.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for your question.
And just to kind of piggyback on that, Nicole, there's also a certain amount of points that will be provided based on your needs assessment. So that's something that each organization will need to do, looking at your expertise and the supports that you have to offer, and then going out and looking at some of those resources. And, you know, there are lots of different options for types that you can use within the RFA in order to make that determination. I hope that helps as well.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, just looking at Shanti has a couple of questions. First one she has is there a maximum amount of dollars each grantee can apply for? And then her follow-up question is, are there any funding restrictions?
So thank you for that question. So as indicated in the RFA, our hope is to award the funding to multiple organizations. Based on your needs assessment, I would say that's what you should ask for. So there isn't a cap on how much you can ask for, but we are hoping to provide the funding to multiple organizations because each of you has a certain area of expertise and a level of strength in what you already do. So that is why we have not stated that there's a specific cap on how much you can ask for, but we absolutely want you to do a needs assessment to determine what the need is for the particular population that you would like to serve. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Just wanted to check. Christopher Fuller, did you have a question?
No, sir, I do not have a question.
Okay. Chris James, did you have a question?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Bethany Kincaid, did you have... Hello?
I'm sorry. There was a question, but I can wait until after you ask your question.
Okay, I'm
There was
just going.
somebody wrote a question.
Okay. Bethany, did you have a question? Bethany, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
I do not have a question.
Okay. Just wanted to just check to make sure. Let's see. Shanti White, she just had a follow-up question. For the central data application, does it need to be submitted before the actual application or after?
Hi, Ashanti. So the central data application should be submitted before, but just note, unless there is an approved application on file, you would not be able to receive payments or anything like that. The application should be completed so that your entity will be listed as an approved business entity within our EGMS system. So you should complete central data first and then proceed to complete your application once you received an approved central data application. The central data application goes to a different team. They approve all central data applications. Simultaneously, you can submit an application to us, but until that central data application is approved, your entity would not be listed as a viable applicant for any grants from OSSE.
Okay, let's see. Okay, she says thank you. Any other questions?
If I may add, while we're waiting to see if anyone has any other questions, if not, we can go ahead and start wrapping up. What I did want to also, if you can go back, Tashin, to the contact slide, one of the things I wanted to share with you all is that the main points of contact for this particular grant opportunity is really me, Nicole Lee Mwanda, and Tashin Stalling. So Danielle Rollins is a rock star and does all kinds of fabulous things with our McKinney-Vento grant and all things grant for our program. But this particular grant opportunity for CBOs is being headed by Tashin and I. So if you have questions that you would like for us to include in the FAQ that we post on our webpage, then absolutely send them to the general OSSE email address at the bottom of hep.osse@dc.gov. And Tashin and I both received that, and we will be sure that your question gets answered within the FAQ. But if you have other questions or need any other things, again, if it's technical assistance, reach out to EGMS directly. But otherwise, Tashin and I are the points of contacts for this. And Danielle is just giving us support for this particular project. Okay, so I just wanted to add that. So do we have any other questions? I don't see any more. All right, any other things you want to add, Tashin? Otherwise, we can wrap up this session.
Just a final reminder that a copy of this presentation is in the handout section. So if you haven't downloaded it, please feel free to do so now. And then again, this is being recorded, so it'll be posted on the website for viewership later. In case there was any other details that you just wanted to review with your team or your organization, in preparation to completing your application or notice of intent.
And again, as a final reminder, OSSE did amend the RFA so that we could extend the deadline for submitting the notice of intent to apply. I know some of you in attendance have already submitted your notice, but those of you that may have been considering it and were concerned that you only had 8 more minutes to send it in, you now have until August 12th. So please know that we have posted that publicly so that everyone is informed of the extended deadline. So again, you have until 3 p.m. August 12th to submit your notice of intent to apply. And then you have until 3 p.m. on August 19th to submit your application. So thank you again for attending this session, and we look forward to receiving your applications. Have a wonderful afternoon. And again, we hope to potentially partner with some of you or all of you, whoever's on the call. But thank you so much for your participation, and we hope that you found this insightful. Thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.